In the headlines, reports suggest the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe may be addressing the U.S. Congress when he travels to Washington later this year. Korean Americans in the U.S. are making moves to oppose the address. The worst winter seasonal yellow dust in 5 years blankets much of Korea, with health warnings issued against the sandy and toxic wind coming from China. And we take a closer look at Korea's casino industry and diagnose growth points as well as risks coming from China. Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News live from Seoul. I am Kang Cheri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with reports on the growing possibility of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe addressing the U.S. Congress during his trip to Washington later this year. But
Korean Americans in the U.S. are already resisting this idea, saying he first needs to apologize for Tokyo's wartime atrocities. Our Kwon So-ah starts us off.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe may give a speech before U.S. Congress during his planned visit to Washington in late April or early May. Various reports say Abe has strongly expressed his will to a congressional delegation from the U.S. who recently visited Tokyo. Many U.S. congressional leaders, including House Speaker John Boehner, are known to be leaning toward letting Abe speak to Congress. If Abe gets the green light, it will mark the first time a Japanese prime minister has addressed U.S. Congress in 54 years. Former Prime Minister Hayato Ikeda was the last Japanese leader to give a speech before the House of Representatives all the way back in 1961. Before that, Nobusuke Kishi addressed Congress in 1957 and Shigeru Yoshida in 1954. Abe reportedly wants to speak before a joint session of the lower and upper house, something no Japanese prime minister has ever done before. However, some obstacles stand in his way. Many Korean Americans are opposed to Abe's move, as he's expected to promote Japan as a country that has followed a peaceful path since the end of World War II. A task force for a Korean council in Washington for women drafted for military sexual slavery by Japan said they launched a petition campaign on Sunday. They will submit a formal letter to California Congressman Ed Royce saying they are opposed to the idea unless Abe makes a sincere apology over Japan's historical wrongdoings first. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And staying with Japan, Korea has further protested Japan's latest territorial claim to Korea's Tokyo Island. The Foreign Ministry has summoned Kenji Kanasugi, a minister at the Japanese embassy in Seoul, to protest Japan's celebrations of its Takeshima Day. Takeshima is what Japan calls Tokyo. For the third straight year, the Japanese government dispatched a senior official to attend an event for this occasion. Seoul calls it historically regressive and questions Tokyo's willingness to strengthen ties with Seoul. South Korea has reiterated its call for dialogue with North Korea just days after the regime is believed to have led live fire drills near the inter-Korean maritime border. But Pyongyang says it won't sit down for talks unless Seoul calls off its upcoming joint military drills with Washington. Our Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
South Korea on Monday urged North Korea to drop any military provocations that could disturb peace on the Korean peninsula. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reportedly inspected live fire drills near the inter-Korean maritime border during the Lunar New Year holiday last week. Seoul's unification ministry responded by reiterating its call for dialogue.
Regardless of the current situation, we remain open to inter-Korean talks.
North Korea issued a series of threats ahead of the annual joint military exercises between South Korea and the United States, scheduled for early March. The North state-run Rodong-Sinmun newspaper said Monday that if South Korea conducts its rehearsal for invading the North with the U.S., South Korean waters will become a site of death. Although Seoul and Washington say the drills are defensive in nature, Pyongyang views them as a practice for war. The paper reiterated that South Korea must end all military hostilities, including the upcoming exercises, if it is sincere about improving inter-Korean ties. North Korea has yet to accept South Korea's offer for talks made nearly 2 months ago. 황상희, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the United States is standing by its position of seeking dialogue with North Korea while firmly responding to the regime's provocations. But North Korea watchers say issues in other parts of the world may be diverting Washington's attention away from North Korea. Our Choi Yoo-sun has the story.
At the start of 2015, Washington slapped additional sanctions on Pyongyang for its alleged hacking of Sony Pictures late last year. In a State of the Union address later in the same month, however, President Barack Obama excluded any reference to North Korea. Then came the U.S. president's controversial YouTube interview in which he said the North Korean regime will eventually collapse as the internet penetrates further into the reclusive country.
And it is very hard to sustain that kind of brutal authoritarian regime in this modern world.
The State Department's official overseeing East Asian affairs days later said that bringing change to North Korea doesn't necessarily involve a collapse of the current leadership.
The fact of the matter is we don't have a hostile policy. We have a denuclearization policy.
Washington's point man on North Korea, Sung Kim, reportedly failed at a recent attempt to engage with the North in a third country. While Kim has said the U.S. has always taken a two-track approach of enforcing sanctions and keeping the door to dialogue open, it seemed odd for the administration to make such a conciliatory gesture immediately after imposing new sanctions. Analysts suggest with the latest proposal, the administration sought to hold the North accountable for the impasse rather than actually resume talks. North Korea chumming up with Russia as of late is also not a welcome development for the U.S., especially as Moscow has invited both the South and North Korean leaders to its World War II commemorative ceremony in May. And that, according to some analysts, prompted President Obama to cause a stir. All in all, crises in the Middle East and Ukraine, along with prolonged deadlock in the North Korean issue, are thought to have diverted the White House's attention away from Pyongyang. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Staying with foreign policy, Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se says a revised nuclear accord between Seoul and Washington would help to strengthen ties between the two allies. Speaking to a delegation from the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations on Monday, Yoon said he hopes talks to revise the cooperative agreement will wrap up in the near future. For the past 4 years, the two countries have been discussing a revision that would allow Korea to reprocess spent nuclear fuel for research and development. The minister added that the two countries are also negotiating details over Korean President Park Geun-hye's visit to the United States this year. We'll blame China for the gray and hazy skies again this Monday. The yellow dust storms blowing in from China have been something Korea has been dealing with every year. And with more industrial pollution hitching a ride on the natural phenomenon, officials in Seoul have long been working with authorities in Beijing to tackle the issue. But as our Lee Ji-yoon reports, it may be time for another approach.
The Korea Meteorological Administration issued yellow dust warnings in Seoul and other major cities throughout Korea this Monday morning. Every year, this unhealthy yellow haze drifts from China and Mongolia, carrying with it industrial pollutants and bacteria, none of which are good for your respiratory health. In response, weather authorities here advise people to stay indoors and wear a protective mask and goggles when going outside. But some might ask, why can't we stop the dust from drifting into Korea? What has been done to make this unwelcome guest go away? Korea and China have been working together for over a decade to fight the yellow dust. Public and private groups from both countries have been planting more trees in the deserts of China and Mongolia to slow desertification. The two countries have also established working groups to research ways to counter rising levels of dust pollution and installed high-tech air monitoring equipment. During an environment ministers meeting between China, Japan, and Korea last year, the ministers talked about each other's environmental policies and agreed to work together to tackle various environmental issues, with improving air quality topping the list. But experts say these efforts are being overwhelmed by China's enormous population and industries that still rely heavily on coal, leading to more air pollution. They say it's time for China to actively develop clean energy to use in place of coal, and for its neighboring countries like Korea to better cooperate with China, as environmental problems like yellow dust have consequences that reach far beyond the borders of any one country. Lee Ji-eun, Arirang News.
Korea's shipbuilding industry was once one of the main driving forces for the country's economic growth. But a recent OECD report says the sector is now posing a threat to the economy. Our Kim Min-ji explains.
Korea's shipbuilding industry is facing serious challenges to getting itself back on solid footing. This according to a recent OECD report that says the global economic crisis has dented the industry's finances. The profitability, or EBITDA, on sales of publicly traded Korean shipbuilders stood at around 5% in 2012, in contrast to the 11% in 2008. EBITDA refers to the earnings before the deduction of interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization expenses. The figure also falls short of the levels recorded by companies in Japan, China, and Germany. The OECD report also points out that the ability of Korean shipbuilders to generate enough profit to cover their debts has declined significantly since 2007. It says while their average debt levels were less than 1.5 times larger than their profit in 2007, the ratio was above 6 in 2012. To be financially stable, a company's debt level should not be more than 3 times its profit. The shipbuilders' weak performance has also led to more government involvement, with government agencies increasing their ownership role in the industry and taking on more risk. If the situation were to continue, the report warns it could have an impact on employment and the financial sector, which could result in a domino effect on the economy as a whole. In dealing with the aftermath of the crisis, the report says the government needs to maintain a level playing field between public and private entities and manage its risks. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
On to some tech news. The Mobile World Congress opens next week in Barcelona. It's one of the main places where you can catch the latest trends in telecom gadgets and technologies. Strategy Analytics has listed Samsung's latest Galaxy smartphone as one of the key gadgets to keep an eye out for. Samsung is set to unveil the Galaxy S6 to the public on March 1st, a day before the official opening of the event. The research firm also says smartwatches will be hot at this year's Mobile World Congress. Samsung and LG are expected to unveil their latest smartwatches ahead of the release of the Apple Watch in April. How does the world view Korea 60-plus years after the Korean War? Well, through all of the fast-paced changes, visitors can tell you Koreans go out of their way to put a friendly face on our culture. And now researchers have released a survey quantifying these perceptions. Our Connie Lee investigates.
So how do you view Koreans? A new survey of about 1,100 foreigners in Korea and abroad reveals both the good and the not-so-good perceptions of Koreans in the world. The survey, conducted by Korea's Institute for International Trade and reported by the Gyeongyang Shinmun, asked foreigners for their insights. Let's take a look. First, at the good. Koreans are seen as hardworking, with more than 21% of the people surveyed saying so. Then, they're seen as kind and patriotic. On the flip side, though, a not-so-good perception of Koreans is that they're too pressed for time or rushed, while 14% see Koreans as too prideful, and 12% see them as unsociable. So if Koreans are seen this way, let's take a look at how Korean society is viewed. The survey points out the merits of Korea's good customer service, the nation's unified spirit, and Korea's dynamic social scenes. But to the bad parts of Korean society, more than 30% of foreigners say it's too competitive, while what they characterize as Korea's attitude of superiority is also seen as a flaw. And while the term 빨리, or quickly is emphasized here in Korea, it is also seen by the world as a negative. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
The Korean government is stepping up efforts to accommodate visiting Chinese tourists, including plans to build attractive resort and casino complexes.
For this week's Industry Insight, our Kim Ji-yeon takes a look at Korea's growing casino industry and the challenges they face.
Will the opening of resort complexes equipped with hotels, shops, and casinos bring investment and boost the economy? The Korean government is betting it will. It believes it can raise $1.8 billion from the casino industry. Now it's letting Korean companies get in on the bidding, a privilege once reserved for foreign investors. Just last month, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance gave the green light for the development of 2 additional foreigner-only casino and resort complexes in the country's free economic zones. It plans to select the 2 licensees by 2020. Already, the country has attracted investors for 2 complexes on Yeongjongdo Island, located in the western city of Incheon. The Korea-based Paradise Group and the multinational casino firm Caesars Entertainment Corporation. Both are seeking to be the Korean version of Singapore's Marina Bay Sands, which raised $5.4 billion in sales last year. But if they're to survive against the massive casino and resort complexes in Macau and Okinawa, they'll have to overcome major challenges. Currently, the Korean government bans its citizens from all casinos except one. Gangwon-land in northeastern Gangwon-do province is the only casino Korean nationals can go to. The other 16 are for foreigners only.
The restriction placed on Korean nationals will affect the competitiveness of the Korean casino industry. The scale and amount of investment in the resort complexes is going to be smaller than in other neighboring countries.
Korea is capping investments in its complexes at $900 million a year, a figure far below that of its rivals. There's also the China risk factor, fears that investment may turn sour depending on the number of tourists visiting Korea. Already, there are signs that the Chinese government may try to restrict its nationals from gambling, both at home and abroad. Chinese President Xi Jinping has been increasing efforts to root out gambling as part of an anti-corruption campaign. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News. Over in Hollywood, this year's Oscars ceremony has wrapped up with the biggest names in the movie industry celebrating well into the night.
For more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, there weren't too many surprises at this year's Academy Awards. Tell us who came out as the big winners.
Well, the dark comedy Birdman, about a struggling actor, got the highest recognition on Sunday, winning the Academy Award for Best Picture. Filmmaker Alejandro Inarritu also took home the award for Best Director. In his acceptance speech, he thanked the audience for watching his, quote, crazy film and dedicated the win to his fellow countrymen.
I want to dedicate this award for my fellow Mexicans, the ones who live in Mexico. I pray that we can find and build the government that we deserve, and the ones that live in this country who are part of the latest generation of immigrants in this country. I just pray that they can be treated with the same dignity and respect of the ones who came before and built this incredible immigrant nation. Thank you very much.
Other top honors went to Eddie Redmayne, who won his first Oscar for Best Actor with his breakout role in The Theory of Everything, and Julia Moore was named Best Actress for her role in Still Alice. However, it was a disappointing night for the coming-of-age story Boyhood, which earned only 1 Oscar out of 6 nominations. And turning to the Middle East, France's aircraft carrier has begun military operations in Iraq as it joins the international coalition against the Islamic extremist group. The Charles de Gaulle, which serves as the flagship of the French Navy, was reportedly deployed in the Persian Gulf as of this Monday. According to Reuters, defense sources say the 37,000-ton warship is being accompanied by an attack submarine and will be engaged in the region for several weeks. In addition to its fleet of fighter jets, France has committed more than 3,000 of its troops to combat IS militants. And taking a look now at the financial markets, investors in Asia set the tone for this week's trading, starting on a mostly positive note. This as Greece reached a last-minute deal with Eurozone finance ministers to extend its bailout agreement for the next 4 months. News of the breakthrough deal in Brussels sent Japan's Nikkei index to finish at a 15-year high on this Monday. Stocks in Hong Kong, on the other hand, lost some ground, breaking a 5-day rally. Despite the overall gains, analysts warn that the global economy may continue to face a bumpy road.
Almost certainly we're going to get volatility. The greatest near-term volatility would be if there's a risk of Greece exiting the Eurozone. That's obvious. But I would argue that actually, even if Greece stays firmly locked into the euro, alongside austerity, that only increases the opportunity for massive volatility further down the line, because eventually people will say no more of this.
In the meantime, the U.S. dollar continues to surge against major currencies. It's climbed nearly 18% over the past year. Global investors are also keeping close tabs on the U.S. Central Bank ahead of Fed Chair Janet Yellen's Senate hearing on Tuesday. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Che with the Sports Brief. It was Oscar night in Hollywood, but across town at Los Angeles' Riviera Country Club, the Northern Trust Open produced its own surprise ending. The final round saw 7 golfers at least share the lead at some point, but Korean-American James Han was the champion after the final 18 to end an exciting 3-hole playoff against Dustin Johnson and Paul Casey for his first PGA Tour title. Along with the $1.2 million payout, the 33-year-old earned a ticket to the Masters and a 2-year exemption on the tour. Over to World Cup fencing, the South Korean men's saber team, number 2 in the world, lunged their way to the finals in Poland to face France. And despite a valiant duel, they fell on the wrong side of a tight 45-43 scoreline, earning the silver medal for their efforts. And coming home for Monday's live games, first to the KBL as the Mobis Phoebus took on the Dongbu Promi. With the league's top teams battling for first, it was a close contest, but Yang Dong-gun and Ham Ji-eun held fast in the final period, leading Mobis to the win that ties them with Dongbu for the top spot. Over to pro volleyball in the V-League, the LIG Graders faced the Korean Air Jumbos, and the Jumbos hardly ran into any turbulence, dropping just the third set en route to the 3-1 victory. Sanchez was great, and so was Kwak Sung-seok as Korean Air recovered from 4 straight losses. Finally, Cristiano Ronaldo continues to build his case as one of the best footballers ever, scoring in Real Madrid's 2-0 league win over Elche to reach a club milestone. The Portuguese international netted his 290th goal for Real, tying Carlos Santana for 3rd on the club's all-time scoring list. Now, what sets the 30-year-old apart, however, is the unprecedented pace at which he's achieved the feat. At this rate, and with just 33 goals separating him from Raul at number 1, he's forecast to break the record next season. And that wraps it up for sports. Your weather's up next. Good night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather outlook. We begin with an update on the yellow dust advisories that have been issued for most parts of the country. At the moment, levels have soared to 318 micrograms per cubic meter here in the capital, which is approximately 10 times the normal levels. The air should gradually clear up a bit by later tonight, but do keep in mind that the dust may still stick around through tomorrow. Other than that, mild winter conditions are in store on Tuesday. Looking ahead for the week, seasonal average weather under clear skies will continue before nationwide showers fall on Thursday and once again on Sunday. On to tomorrow's readings. The daytime high here in the capital hits 7, Daegu 11, Gwangju hits 10. Meanwhile, Jeju reaches up to 10, Dokdo hits 7, Mount Kumgang -4. That's all the updates I have for you now, and here's a look at the international weather.
And that's Primetime News for this Monday. Thanks for watching, and I'm Kang Cheri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.